Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith. A federal report warns that SEPTA's contract with a state-owned Chinese company lacked proper oversight and may not have met federal guidelines for Buy America requirements. Joining me today is a Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. Anthony, tell us a little bit more about this contract and what exactly is Buy America and why does it matter?
Yeah, so this seems like a story of poor federal oversight and poor state oversight. So when you have certain contracts worth a certain level of value with an overseas company, there's these federal rules that kick in, colloquially referred to as Buy America requirements. Basically showing that, it either you can't get these in the U.S. or it's more expensive to do so in the U.S. And then there's other requirements, as in this case with railcars, that they would have to be assembled in America, even if they're manufactured in China. So these requirements are basically in place to serve as protections for American manufacturing. A few years back, SEPTA signed a deal with a Chinese company, basically ordering about 45 rail cars to use on the regional rail. The problem was essentially federal requirements for showing that you meet Buy America rules do not really require you to keep a lot of this paperwork. And then SEPTA, when they hired an auditor to go through all this to verify that the Buy America requirements are being followed, they basically couldn't check the work of this outside auditor. This essentially led to more scrutiny from a few federal congressmen who called the contract and a few others into question, which then also alerted the FTA to it, who then called out SEPTA about this. And about a month after getting this warning from the feds, SEPTA then canceled the contract. So it was about $140 million by the time the contract was canceled. It had been about $50 million was spent, and it's still not clear how much, if any, of that will actually be clawed back from the company. And we are left with no new railcars as a result.
So we may have just spent $50 million for nothing. And it seems that we can't just blame SEPTA for this, right?
It looks that way, yeah. It gets complicated because these rules can be tricky, and they're meant to be in place to boost American manufacturing. But the paperwork required, the oversight, the due diligence that goes along with these, it's kind of viewed as if we have a Buy America requirement, you get that stamp of approval, but it doesn't really seem to work out that way. And so there are federal problems with how this gets executed, how this gets run. But at the same time, SEPTA did not quite look very good coming out on this. It's also trying to get some comment from SEPTA. They declined to comment for the story when I asked them, are they updating its policies to improve oversight on audits like this? Are they improving, or do they agree with the report calling SEPTA ill-positioned to actually ensure compliance? And what efforts it's making, if any, to figure out how much of this money came from SEPTA funds, how much of it came from federal funds. So this audit report was a fairly big warning here. The report said the federal agency does not require recipients or third-party auditors to retain any documentation from the pre-award audit in order to maintain confidentiality regarding manufacturer's cost data. However, without this documentation, the federal agency and SEPTA have no assurance as to the quality and thoroughness of the pre-award audit work performed. So it's basically you're outsourcing the hard work of ensuring these contracts meet Buy America requirements, but we don't really have a way to verify any of that. So if the auditor messes up, SEPTA is going to have no idea. The FTA is not going to have any idea either.
It's an interesting development considering that if you get back more broadly on the issue, SEPTA's having a lot of funding challenges and they're asking the state for help, right? Yeah,
I think this plays into this push and pull where very little of SEPTA's funding actually comes from local sources. It's only about 10%. I think it's something like 50% comes from federal funds, 40% comes from state funds. And so reports like this make it very difficult for SEPTA to make this argument that maybe the state needs to kick in more or the feds need to kick in more or, rural Pennsylvanians need to fund these transit systems more. I think, it's good that we get reports like this, but at the same time, if it's not actually leading to any change or any revision of policies or getting some plan from SEPTA's leaders of how they improve this kind of stuff, that really undermines, I think, the case, or at least the attractiveness of rural legislators or legislators not coming from the Philadelphia area to actually fund SEPTA more.
Anthony, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.